Good evening, everyone. So today the discussion will be mainly on Charlotte Smith's poem To the Moon. We have our third semester students today to participate and go for an analysis of the poem based on some relevant aspects of the poem. And through this discussion, we will try to learn or understand what the poem is about. Charlotte Smith's poem, as I said earlier, was published in the collection called Elegiac Sonnets way back in the year 1784. And on the basis of the first reading of the sonnet, we have come to an appreciation, understanding of the poem, and we regard this poem as a significant achievement of the Romantic poetry, Romantic period. Ananya Ghosh is with us. She will be speaking on the theme, on the romantic theme of the poem, and the analysis will help us. Ananya Ghosh, are you there online?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
May I start?
Yes, you can turn your video on.
Okay, sir. Sir, I have some problem, so.
Start, please.
Okay, sir. Okay. So, Charlotte Smith is a romantic novelist. Wrote the poem To the Moon through her personal experience of her life. She wrote this poem with full of symbols and imageries. Here she addresses to the moon not as a symbol of subjective chastity or a symbol of beauty. Here the moon is used to suggest maternal love and affection. Here the poet makes a comparison between this earthly world, which is a subject to decay or a world of decay or ever-changing world, with the world of moon, where she wants to escape from this sublunary world. Diana, the queen of the night, holding the silver bow and every natural object on the stream, and affected every natural object on the stream, on the floating clouds, and also upon the poet's troubled breast. So the soft ray of the moon is a symbol of relaxation to her, and she thinks that the moon is the heaven to her, where all the poor warrior pilgrims want to go from this earthly foiling sin. So that's it for today.
Thank you, Ananya, for giving such a suitable introduction to the poem. Nicholas Rowe in the book Romanticism says what you have already said. He has talked about the poem, and he says that the silver bow that presides in this poem is also the bow of Diana the huntress. Diana the huntress. But the classical moon goddess, who is regarded as the emblem of chastity, is here replaced by the image of calm maternal love. That is what Nicholas Rowe has stated. So the aggressive purity is turned by Smith into one of maternal love, just as she emphasizes the moon's calmness, not its traditional changeableness. This is what Nicholas Rowe has said about the poem. Thank you, Ananya. So we have now Anisha Chatterjee.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So may I start?
Yes, video on mode if you want.
All right, sir. To the Moon by Charlotte Smith is a poem where the moon is portrayed as a beautiful creation. Earth is filled with too much evil and sins, and people can rest in moon, as here the moon is compared to heaven. The moon glares brightly even though the world is dark. Here the dark has two meanings. The darkness that lies without light, and secondly, another darkness that is perhaps the sins and evils present on earth, as the poet calls earth a toiling sin. The poet says that the moon has the ability to make a sad child happy, and it can free people and it can release people from their hardships and sadness, miseries and grief. So here the moon is a place or an object of solace, and it is an object of serenity. So that this much.
Thank you, Anisha, for identify. Thank you very much, Anisha, for identify
Yes.
the central symbol of the poem. You have rightly pointed out that this moon symbology is presented in the poem as an abode of peace, harmony, and refuge for the wearied souls on the earth. And Charlotte Smith has presented the symbol of moon with the help of closely knit imagery, set of imagery, and she shows the contrast between the world of pain, world of suffering, that is sublunary, and the world of serenity, calmness, peace, and maternal love, that is the world of the luminous world of the moon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Anisha. So our next speaker is Anusmita Siddhanta. Anusmita,
Yes,
please say
sir.
something. Yeah.
So may I start?
Yes, video on mode and start.
Charlotte Smith's To the Moon is sonnet number 14 from Elegiac Sonnet, which is written in Romantic era. Charlotte Smith uses moon as a symbol of heaven. The language of the poem is dark and have a sad tone. Moon is the epitome of sad and loneliness. Smith contrasts here moon with a woman. The first line starts with moon as a queen of the silver bow. She directly addressing moon and speaking to it. So many languages here glorifies the exact purpose of this poem. The symbol and imagery is filled throughout many languages. There is so much things are bad and wretched in world like moon have. So very interestingly, moon is compared to a woman as well as a planet. Both have their personal misery and painful feelings. The word alone and pensive is are both features of a moon. Speaker is here poet herself. She uh, her personal expression and feeling throughout this poem is in the line or mark the floating clouds that cross thy way creates the relationship between the moon and floating clouds. The romantic element here touches with in practical way all of presentable and depressing language. Smith portrays the moon as a beautiful creation. The moon also allows a sad child to forget about all of sadness and pain in their lives. The words despair and woe is the architect of those kind of pensive feature. Next, the another imagery is cup. In the romantic tradition, cup has the another feature to hold of memory and love. Very interestingly, like a cup contains both hot and cold element, it also hold love with has sad and joy together. Thus, Smith, as a woman poet, signifies herself as most prominent poem in Romantic era in male-oriented society. She tries to corroborate to earthly human beings with nature. Nature is here absorbed. This poem has very much intense subjectivity.
Thank you, the poem. So you have drawn our attention to the individuality, subjectivity, the evolving symbology of the moon, and how the poet, as a female poet, connects despair and suffering on the earth with the serenity of the moon. So in this poem, the moon looks down on the earthly state of change, decay, toil, and passion, from which the poet longs to be rescued. So this old use of cosmology is there. Everything that is beneath the moon, the sublunary world, that was subject to time and mortality. And Smith is very careful to draw this attention on the idea in order to contrast the world of despair and woe on the earth with the idea of eternal or higher love, higher sphere, higher world of joy, peace, tranquility, and happiness. Thank you, Anishmita, for your analysis. So we have next participant, Arati Shah.
Yes, sir. May I start,
Yes,
sir?
yes, make your presentation, please.
Smith is also very interested in social conditions and politics. Her poetry famous for its
Excuse me, please introduce yourself. I've wrongly named you. Okay, please introduce yourself.
Sir, I have a problem in my account. That's why I am using my sister's account.
Okay, just name yourself. That will be easier.
Sir, it's me, sir, Neha, sir. My name is Neha, sir.
Yeah, just that introduction. So go a bit slow. You are just rushing. When you are reading that, okay, be a bit slow. We are all absorbing what you are saying, listening to you carefully. Okay, give us some space.
So may I start, sir?
Yes, start.
Okay. Smith is also very interested in social conditions and politics. Her poetry, famous for its melancholy and sadness, became high popular in the following years. Charlotte put down her thoughts in the form of sonnet, and the poem Sonnet 4 to the Moon is one of them, and this sonnet is filled with imagery and description. In nocturnal poetry, the moon often fulfills the poet's desire. Smith's sonnet depicts this connection between the moon and poetic persona, and while I gaze, the mild and placid light sets a soft calm upon my troubled breast. While Smith gazes the moon sends its light down to her. In this poem, Smith addresses the moon with the hope and compares to heaven, because in the night, moon is the only thing which has a bright effect, and it puts all its brightness on mostly dark and saddening earth. She calls earth a toiling scene due to bad things, evils, and sins which is happening on earth. Here, Moon, the huntress and classical moon goddess, is turned and transformed from a symbol of aggressive purity into a symbol of maternal love. Charlotte Smith emphasizes the moon's calmness, which is traditional. The presence of moon is also seen in the poem Rime of the Ancient Mariners. In Rime of the Ancient Mariners, we have regular presence of moon as well as the full moon. College is presenting the moon is the symbol of maternal love. So we have the transformation of aggressive symbol of female purity into a symbol of maternal love. Calmness is emphasizing in the poem rather than the sensibility of moon. Moon is the symbol of changeability, but there is no symbol of changeableness. The moon looks down to the earthly state, the symbol of decay and morality. We have the division into the two worlds. The heavenly world of the moon symbolizes the immorality, and the world that is earthly, that symbolizes morality. So this idea is contrasted. The despair and woe on the earth has been contrasted with eternal higher pure. Here the realization is that calm moon offers some kind of shelter, but the shelter is not permanent. In poem, we can see the self is gradually opening out, and also internal relation of self with others. According to the Karl Marx, self is not individual consciousness being that determines the self. Rather, it is a social being of an individual that determines the consciousness. She has purposely used this tactic to write her poem, but towards the end there is an escalation to the happier ending. Thus, a romantic poet and novelist, Charlotte Turner Smith, expresses her poem in a very beautiful way. That's also.
Thank you, Neha, for this excellent analysis. You went a bit fast, but
Thank
we
you,
could
sir.
understand what you said. It was clear, lucid, and you have covered so many points together. So you talked about the sublunary world, you talked about the mortality, time mortality, talked about the changeableness, decay, toil, change. So these are the main areas on which we must focus. M.H. Abrams talked about mirror and the lamp in order to differentiate the world of romantic poetry with the poetry of the previous age. So while, as Horace had suggested, that the literature should always reflect the society, hold a mirror to the society. So that Roman classicism entered into the English poetry, and poets were more or less more inclined towards representing the society faithfully as far as practicable, holding a mirror to society. In romantic poetry, we find a kind of replacement. This mirror is replaced by a lamp, self-illuminating lamp. And Charlotte Smith is perhaps one of the first poets who is using this poetry as a medium to illuminate not only the mind of the readers, but also the consciousness of the poet, who keeps on evolving the symbols in order to naturalize human experience in a profound and philosophical manner. So the mood is calm, mood is internalized, nature and human nature meet to create what we think of as a self. We have also talked about this social being, and this social being also contains human proximity to nature. Okay, thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much for this analysis. So our next speaker
Thank
is
you, sir.
Astha. Our next speaker is Astha Viswas. Astha, make your
Yes,
presentation.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm audible and visible both.
Yes, start Astha.
To the Moon is written by Sherlock Smith, was written by Sherlock Smith, published in 1784 in Elegiac Sonnets. In this poem, the moon is described in depth as both an object and place of rest or relief from earth. The sufferers of the earth may go. The speaker, Charlotte Smith, uses the moon as a symbol of heaven. The descriptive language in the poem is mostly dark and saddening, which brightens the effect of moon in the night sky. He calls earth a toiling scene, speaking of all the evils and sin on earth. The moon would be a great heaven. Even when the world is dark, it remains shining bright. The moon is a symbol of femininity. It is alluded to or outright referred to as Cynthia or Dinah and given feminine as queen of the night. The moon comes up in conjunction with the feminine and melancholy. Smith's usage of the moon as a symbol differs from that of Young, who addresses the moon as a symbol of the rapid changes undergone by both the moon and the earth. She imagines the moon as a symbol of heavenly peace and serenity, which not only symbolizes heaven, it is the place where sufferers go after death. That's it, sir.
Thank you, Astha, for your analysis, original and very to the
Thank you, sir.
point analysis. So you have drawn our attention to the symbology of moon and how in the second quatrain the poet gradually brings the speaker's response to the moon as calm mood
Yes,
is
sir.
internalized, both the nature and the human nature meet in order to create, in order to illuminate. As I say, it's a trope
Yes,
of
sir.
lamp to illuminate the mind. And even you refer to the concluding section of the poem where the self opens out to include the sufferers of the earth. Therefore, this personal sorrow, the elegiac tone that is there in this poem, is subsumed into a natural human condition. The contrast between heaven and earth that you have pointed out is also significant in this poem. So, earthly world is not a world of delight. Rather, it is a recognition of the pains and sufferings of the world that makes the poet aware of the social realities. Even the couplet brings out this realization, and even she longs to escape from this pain, poor wearied pilgrim in the toiling scene. So this tragic realization is at the end of the poem. But this is not a wish, a death wish. Usually elegies comment on the departing souls, on the separation of individuals. The tone is always nostalgic and elegiac. Here we have some kind of positive message given by the poet that this silvery bow of the queen will give that possible refuge to the inhabitants of the earth. Just by looking at this blessed calmness of the moon, the human beings will be inspired. Thank you, Asta, for telling us all these. Our next speaker is
Thank you, sir.
Aisha. Aisha, make your presentation.
Yes, sir. So, may I start?
Yes.
Okay. To the Moon by Charlotte Smith is a highly visual poem in the form of a sonnet. Pre-romantic elegiac sonnets were mostly biographical or autobiographical. This poem is also no exception. This poem is a personal, intimate story full of contrast, like joy and suffering, earth and moon, light and darkness. As the poem starts, the poet calls the moon, quote unquote, queen of silver bow. She sees the moon as the queen of its own kingdom, alone and bright. Charlotte Smith presents the moon in a heavenly way. She visits the moon as a symbol of eternity, love,
Now, Aisha is offline. So, what she was trying to say is that the queen moon with a silver bow, that is an allusion to Diana, and she was talking about the intermingling of the natural world. Yes, Aisha, she's again online. Aisha, continue.
Yes, sir, sorry,
Yeah,
connectivity
continue.
problem. Yeah.
Continue. Yeah.
Throughout the poem, the moon is considered to be a better place than Earth, which the poet calls wretched. The Earth has been presented as a depressing planet to show the moon as a calm place, a place to rest, where the sad children can go and forget their suffering. Moon is a place or an another world where there is no despair, distress, or woe. The moon is considered to be a romantic element with great symbolic value. Except the moon, the other symbols are the night time, the trembling shadows, etc. The poem takes place during the night, maybe to set the contradiction more clearly between light and darkness. In line number 3, the shadow is trembling, which symbolizes something unpleasant. But the visual imagery seems to be more attractive with the word trembling than calm or still. To be concluded, I must say that from moon as a symbol of maternal love, or as the Greek huntress Diana, to earth as a sublunary space of decay and sorrow and human mortality, the poem is an example of perfect elegiac sonnet of pre-romantic era of English literature. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Aisha, for your excellent presentation. Well prepared discussion on this sonnet, Charlotte Smith to the Moon. So, what you have said actually refers to the contrasting images of the moon as well as of the inhabitants of the earth, the
Yes.
sufferers of the earth. They desire to move into the world of the moon, the heavenly world of the moon, who resembles Diana, the huntress goddess. So it is not just the release by death by which the inhabitants of the earth might find this benign, benignant sphere of refuge and abode, but it is also through the power of imagination that the sufferers might alleviate their pains and suffering. And the elevation of the soul is a hallmark of romanticism. Elevation of the soul or the mind, elevation of the mind is an aspect of romanticism. Thank you for drawing our attention to this. So our
Thank you,
next
sir.
presentation will be by Bidisha. Bidisha, you are on the line.
Yes, sir. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, please make your presentation.
Yes. So, Sonnet 4 to the Moon comes under Elegiac Sonnet, which is a collection of poetry written by Charlotte Smith, published in 1784. It is notable for its poetic representation of personal emotion. It's Charlotte Smith who initiated the revival of sonnet. An overall feeling of bleak sadness is the dominating feature of elegiac sonnet. Here, as in the first line of the sonnet, Queen of the silver bow, by thy pale beam. So here the word queen is denoted for the Greek goddesses Diana, who is the goddesses of hunting. As the line read, Queen of the silver bow, she is always carrying a bow and arrow with a quiver slung over a shoulder. So here, silver bow is full of allusion, which is used in romantic age. In the poem, moon is represented as the heavenly beauty. Moon is referred as the femininity because of its attributes like beauty, calmness, which are basically considered as the characteristics of females. There in the second line, we found she is delighted by the fact of wandering alone. It is very awe-striking fact that at the very age of the 18th century was a transitional period where women were oppressed in the society. She is wandering at night, which symbolizes her power and strength of goddesses. As the sixth line reads, sheds a soft calm upon my troubled breast. The word trouble indicates sorrow, pain, depression, where the poet is cured by moonlight. In the seventh line, the fair planet of the night gives an astronomical image. Is indicated to the moon. According to the poet, moon is the most calm, beautiful, trouble-free place. Or in other words, moon is the solution of every problem. In the eighth line, that in the orb the wretched may have rest. The poets say the orbit of the moon will be a happy place for the wretched ones, the one full of misery and sorrow. In the 9th and 10th line, the only way to the heavenly place, moon is death. Moon is death, which is important feature of elegy. The poet is even ready to welcome her death to seek her happiness, peace on the moon. That's also.
Thank you, Vidisha, for your excellent analysis. So this
Thank you,
analysis, we are focused on individual lines and symbols of the poem, and we have also learned from you the use of the symbol of Diana, the goddess. So the goddess in Roman mythology that has been used in this poem. She is a celebrated goddess in the Hellenistic religious belief system. And we have a kind of romantic mythopoetic, mythopoetic reference or allusion to this goddess. The opening line of the poem, Queen of the Silver Bow, reveals this allusion and makes it more prominent. So Diana, as a Roman goddess, was a patroness of the countryside, of the hunting. She's a huntress goddess, and of the crossroad, and also of the moon. So she is almost like the Greek goddess Artemis. You must have heard the name of Artemis. Artemis is a Greek goddess. Roman and Greek goddess, although they serve the same purpose, same iconography is there, they have different names. Diana is also considered as a virgin goddess, and with that, she is also the protector of childbirth. And this is a triad of the Greek goddess with whom she shares, like with Egeria and Varbius, the woodland goddess, and the nymph goddess Egeria. She shares a kind of natural world, and she presides over this natural world. What Charlotte Smith does is to take into account the natural symbology and relate that to the theme of immortality and maternity, fertility and joy. So this is presented through a direct allusion to Diana, the huntress goddess, in this poem. Thank you, Vidisha, for your analysis. So we move on to our next presenter, Daraksha Parveen. Daraksha, make your presentation, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, am I audible and visible?
Yes. Make your presentation, please.
Sir, you miss Brototi.
Okay, I will come to Brototi. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Daraksha, make your presentation.
Yes, sir. Charlotte Smith, a romantic poet and novelist, is describing earthly sorrows and human mortality through with the contrasting image of moon's maternal love. An escaping idea is also described through her sonnet number 4, To the Moon. In the poem, she describes moon as a heavenly place. She uses various imagery and symbols to justify the calmness of moon. In the first quatrain, she describes her interest in moon's beauty and its pale rays, which is soothful to the poet. She enjoys watching moon and its shadow trembling in streams and the clouds which passes the moon, as it is a relief from earthly sorrow. In the second quatrain, she describes the calm mood and relaxing result of her by enjoying its beauty and peacefulness. For the earthly life and for the earthly life is rest. In the third quatrain, she focuses on the sufferers of the earth who may get calm and peace in moon's kind surface after releasing by death. She believes that worried people would forget their sorrows and ooze in their surface. The sonnet seems a mirror to her own desires, where she describes her wish to go there and her wantings of escaping the harsh earth, where she sees herself a poor wearied pilgrim. With the use of various imagery and symbols, the poet presents the poem in a very beautiful manner. In the beginning of the sonnet, the poet describes Moon as the queen of the silver bow. The bow resembles of Diana from Roman mythology, who is the goddess of hunting. But here she addresses it to the moon. The image of aggressiveness is evolved into the image of calmness, peacefulness. She made a contrast between the wretched earthly world and the heavenly world of the moon. It will not change its calmness, whether the earthly sorrows are mortal. That's it, sir.
Okay, thank you, Daraksha. Thank you, Daraksha, for your presentation. So you have referred to so many aspects of the poem. So I just want to point out this allusion to Diana, Diana the huntress goddess, how the queen symbology, moon symbology has been transformed in the work with the help of Diana. Even Diana's allusion, mythological character, has been changed. I find it very interesting that in Ovid's Metamorphosis, in Ovid's version of a myth of this Diana, in the work called Metamorphosis, he tells the story of Diana, the goddess of the woods, who once upon a time was bathing and resting after a hunt, as because she's also a huntress goddess. So Akatin, Actaeon, Acton, a young hunter, stumbled across the grotto and accidentally witnessed the goddess bathing without invitation. So in retaliation, what did Diana do? Diana splashed him with water from the pool and cursed him. And at that instant, this Actaeon was transformed into a deer. So do you remember where this allusion is given? In one of the famous plays of Shakespeare. You must be remembering that allusion. So Diana splashed Actaeon with water from the pool, cursing him, and he transformed into a deer. So his own hunting dogs caught his scent and tore him apart. So Ovid's version of the myth of Actaeon, of course, differs from the earlier sources, but never ignore that source. Whatever it is, we know that in this particular poem, we have a direct allusion or transformation rather of this huntress goddess Diana to a maternal goddess moon. In Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Samuel Taylor Coleridge talks about this presence of the moon accompanied by a few stars, and he recalls how he has mariner, through the mariner's eyes, he recalls how this mariner has lost his home. And Coleridge also has had a very close relationship with his mother and siblings and the kins. So he is suddenly, the ancient mariner is suddenly reminded of the home, of the maternal love, and the few stars remind him of his brothers and sisters. So here we have this transformation. But the allusion is of course there about related to the huntress goddess, the goddess of chastity and strict chastity that is there in this poem also. Here we also have a transformation of this Diana of the myth into a more benevolent human type of figure. And as she is always related to the world of nature as a goddess, here we find this romantic affinity with nature. And nature is personified through the moon. The entire nature is personified through the moon in this particular poem. So as romantic poetry can be regarded as a return to nature, we have definitely a celebration of this yearning of the poet to return to the world of nature. And in the lap of the foster mother, moon, this poet Charlotte Smith is also yearning a kind of refuge, yearning for a refuge, escape from the despair and woe, the sad despair and woe of humanity. Our next presentation will be by Bratoti. So Daraksha, thank you for this. Okay, Brototi, make your presentation, please.
Yes, sir, but my headphone is not working. So can I read it without setting on the mobile on video mode?
Okay, make your presentation, no problem.
Okay, sir. Thank you. The poem To the Moon of Charles Smith is reliving a subjective association of the poet with an autobiographical touch. The poet persona chooses sonnet form as the medium of expression of her mental state, which is subject to her personal life, through some vivid inorganic images throughout the poem. The poem unveiling the ways of redemption from earthly sorrows, troubles, misery. In the very first line, the poet is by calling off the traditional association of female with the shape of moon, which also signified Diana, the Greek goddess of chastity and heavenly beauty. She conceives the Queen Moon, as the emblem of maternal love and affection. With the phrase alone and pensive, she also vents to the reader the loneliness encircled her, which also provides her a chance of experiencing nature quite conspicuously. The phrase troubled breast is also creating an inorganic image from whose clutch the poet comes to nature to ease her mind. The death is a significant inorganic imagery that the word death is a significant inorganic imagery that refers to human mortality and also the ultimate peace that can be attained through the eternal rest. The poet is also longs for the heavenly world of immortality through some abstract images like the benignant sphere, thy world serene, which is the abode of ecstasy and tranquility, contrasted with the idea of mundane world through the phrase like toiling scene, which is full of fortitude, anxiety, problems, and misery. The poet uses a beautiful imagery, the cup of sorrow, in the third quatraint to describe the affliction of earth that designates the chalice containing the blood of Christ, implies Christian Eucharistic fashion, the quest of Holy Grail. There are also some other inorganic images in that quatraint, like sad, despair, awe, that only be cured by the savior nature as prophesied by the poet persona. Thank you, sir. That's it.
Thank you, Brototi, for this analysis. So, mainly imagery analysis of the poem, and we have drawn our attention to the recurring symbols, especially the symbol that evolves and creates a kind of imagery. As I was just telling, the story of this Diana and the Acton story, Acton is transformed into a deer, and his own desires chase him like hounds. In the Plutarch's rendering of this myth, Plutarch was a Roman historian. So he stated that in the temples of Rome, the worshippers of Diana were all welcome. So they included, most of the temples allowed the entry of men and women. And she was regarded as a nature goddess, the goddess of the woods, as well as the goddess of the moon. So this worship was there, but she was also a goddess presiding over a heavenly world. And according to Plutarch, that there was a temple on the Vicius Patricius where men either were not allowed to enter or they themselves did not enter because they were afraid of being transformed into a deer. So this was a temple in the Roman period where men were not allowed. So I'm referring to this story because Diana in Roman symbology is also a female goddess, okay, matriarchal goddess, triumphing over the male with a power. In Greek and Roman mythology, we often find the presence of such goddess with strength of mind, strength of body. And here we have the combination of the legendary huntress goddess with the goddess of chastity, purity. But this aggressive purity is just turned into maternal love. and creativity. So Plutarch talked about a legend that a man had attempted to assault a woman worshipping in the temple, and then he was simply killed by a pack of dogs. So this was the prevalent view that anyone attempting to raise the chastity of a female will be attacked by a pack of dogs. So this superstition, although this appears to be superstition, Charlotte Smith, probably as a female romantic poet, is using a female symbol rather than a male one. In most of the male writings, wherever the female symbols or mythological symbols are used, they are used either as Helen or as Venus or as just a symbol of feminine chastity or femininity, of beauty, of sensuality. Here we do not have this reference to the sensuality of the moon of Diana, the Roman goddess. So her huntress nature, her maternal love, her love for general humanity, all these are foregrounded to this poem. That is the difference between the male romantics. So here the female gaze, looking even at the moon or through the moon, looking back at the Roman mythology. This is a female gaze that differentiates the other poems written by the romantic male poets and Charlotte Smith's To the Moon. Thank you. Thank you for this presentation, both of you. So our next presentation will be by Farzana. Farzana Khatun, make your presentation, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, audible but not visible. You can make yourself visible if you feel comfortable.
No, sir, it's okay.
Okay, continue.
Like the other romantic poets, Charlotte Smith also begins her poem with the description of nature, which is one of the crucial elements in romantic poetry. In the first quatrain of the poem, she seems to praise the external beauty of the nature. The readers are given a vivid, colorful, and pictorial description of the moon being silver in color, her pale beams, and also the floating clouds, which adds a living touch to the reader's imagination. The poetess's delight in the external beauty of the moon indicates towards her love for nature. In the first two lines of the second stanza, she describes the mild and tranquil light of the moon, which provides a calmness upon her troubled breast. Here she seems to internalize the calming and healing nature of the moon. But soon in the fourth line of this stanza, she shifts from the internalization of self to the other people of the world, when she asserts, quote unquote, that in thy robe the wretched may have rest. With this assertion, she reveals and shares the maternal nature of the moon with the other commune. Thus she addresses nature as a place where one can find rest. She assumes the orb of the moon as a place where the wretched of the earth may have rest. People who suffer on the earth may go to her benignant sphere after death. She hopes that sad children of despair will forget their cup of sorrow in the idealistic world of maternal moon. Thus, the poet seems to have an optimistic belief in the maternal nature of the moon, and through this belief, she connects men with nature. And finally, in the concluding couplet, the poetess wishes to reach the peaceful world of maternal love. Thus, her belief in one of the natural element, quote unquote, moon, as a mild, tranquil, and having a maternal nature seems to echo the pessimistic belief of William, who looks upon nature as a healing influence on troubled mind, and his poem, in his poem Tintin Abbey. Sorry, once again. Tintin Abbey. Smith talks about the common and ordinary suffering people of the world, with her expressions like quote unquote wretched sufferers of the earth and sad children, and no person from the elite class, which is one of the features of the romantic poems. Easy language of the poem, its sonnet forms following the iambic pentameter verse, imagery, symbols, and personification of the moon also categorizes it as a romantic poem. Charlotte Smith's use of phrases like unquote the sad children of despair and shows her focus on the emotions of the people, which once again resembles one of the crucial features of the romantic age. This shifts her focus from the intellectual side of the hello.
Hello, continue. Yes. Anything more you
So
want to say? Okay. Is it
it's
over?
okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
over.
Thank you, Farzana, for your
Thank you
analysis. You
so
have
much.
also pointed out to the different aspects, the imagery, symbols, figurative language, the use of moon symbology. We have in this poem excellent use of figures of speech. Although,
Yes,
as a poet, Charlotte Smith has often been accused, like all other female poets, of writing disturbingly melancholic poems, elegiac poems, like Emily Dickinson, tear-jerking poems. And she has been said to be a poet with some kind of mental and emotional depression. But even though her biography says that she was trapped in a bad marriage, had many children to support, and did work very hard in order to support. But we must always remember that she's also struggling very hard to become an artist poet. And in spite of the personal life stories, she's writing such excellent poems with positive message and even interconnecting not with the self, with the sorrow of the self, but with the universal sorrows, the plight of the humanity. So this is done with the help of poetical language, figurative language, the devices that she is using. So we can say that Charlotte Smith is also a poet who is a very good craftsman. Okay, craftsperson rather. Craftsperson who is able to use simple language, diction in a proper metrical form and with the proper use of allusions drawn from Greek, Roman, and biblical themes, and then relating that with the contemporary condition of human beings. So I must always remind you that 1784 in England was a troubled time. It was a period that was marked by so many problems at home, a large scale depopulation of the villages, the industrial revolution has just started, the transformation of an agrarian England was seen during this period. And this sad children of despair and woe almost bring Charlotte Smith very close to the anxieties that we have in the poems of William Blake, especially William Blake's poems like London, Jerusalem, where we have these references to the contemporary crisis. Especially in London, when the poet says that the narrator says that mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. So like William Cooper and William Blake, Charlotte Smith can easily relate her personal sorrow and suffering with the suffering and sorrows of general humanity. And this is done with the help of an excellent mastery over the poetic idiom, poetic diction, poetic meter. Thank you, Farzana, for your presentation. Our next
thank you,
presentation will be
sir.
by Next presentation will be by Kasturi Mandal. Kasturi, make your presentation, please.
Yes, sir. To the Moon is a sonnet written by Charlotte Smith, where she places her own life and emotional state directly alongside her thoughts on the subject and projects her feelings out and relates to the suffering she sees. The unattached nature of emotions further elides individual differences with a heightened concentration on subjectivity and thoughts about the connection on how one sees the world cannot be separated from the self. Just like here, Smith connects herself as an individual as a physical body connecting to the world outside. Hence, she associates individual disposition. She constructed the poem using I persona writing, wherein the nature and her identity submerges. Here, nature is absorbed in consciousness which keeps on evolving the symbols throughout the poem that shows the human experience and the wretchedness of the earth and the sufferers living. She touts on such ideas as the validity of intense feeling in as individual, as she regards the context of feeling most important in her monologue. She views the moon as a heaven and wishes that she soon may reach the world serene. Using the moon symbology, she shows the ephemeral world and the transient world. The heavenly world of the moon symbolizes immortality, where the earthly world symbolizes mortality. However, she is occupied with the self rather than the spiritual. Melancholy is therefore present in her verse and represents a key way of seeing her as an individual. So the female world of earthly pain of mortality has been contrasted to the permanent eternal world of the female as maternal borders of moon. Therefore, rather it is the social being that determines the consciousness of the individual self. Therefore, without the society, a self is not possible. That's all.
Thank you, Kasturi, for an excellent analysis, brief, precise, to the point, excellently well written. So this analysis also draws our attention. So my query was that whether she is able to transcend the limitations of her individuality. She focuses on one of her favorite subjects that we find in other poems also of Charlotte Smith, nature. So it is a nature is used as a metaphor for her turbulent feelings, as you have rightly pointed out. The somber tone that is there in the poem begins with the sonnet's first word itself. So, Queen of the Silver Bow, thy pale being, alone and pensive, and gradually she develops this.
Yes, sir.
So, my question is that whether she is able to transcend the personal suffering, the turbulent feelings that are.
Yes, sir. She moves on from herself then to the world, earthly people living in the earth.
So, is it just an extension of the self, seeing sorrow everywhere, as she herself is in a turbulent state? So, she finds this kind of suffering everywhere. Or do you find that this is a
Yes,
social or real, actual picture of the world? What do you think?
it's the actual picture of the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Kasturi, for drawing our attention to this. So, we have with us Dipankar Mullik now. So, Dipankar, would you like to make your presentation? Dipankar, you are there on the line? Yes, make your presentation, please. Yes, Dipankar. So video on.
Sir, there is a networking problem going on. Sir, I'm just going to my roof.
Okay, so in the meantime, let us have our next participant, Krishna. Krishna Devidas, please make your presentation.
Okay, sir.
Okay, make your presentation, please.
Hello?
As a woman who is very much impressed, sir, am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
Krishna, you are audible. Dipankar, just wait. Okay, after Krishna, Dipankar, you will say. Yeah,
Okay,
get the
sir.
connection proper. Yeah. Krishna, make your presentation. You are audible.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So if you
As
want, you
a
can make
woman who
yourself
is very
known.
much immersed in
If you
the
want,
physical realities of a
okay, continue, no problem.
As a woman who is very much immersed in the physical realities of her own miserable life, Charlotte Smith cannot detach herself from the earthly to realize a spiritual connection with the divine creative power. In the sonnet to the moon, the speaker seems to have a conversation with the moon, gazing at whom she finds solace and balm to her pain. And while I gaze, thy mild and placid light sheds a soft calm upon my troubled breast. Transcendentalism approach to the poem cracks open the inner sublime core, which reveals all the pain the speaker has. She's, she not only finds solace in her own pain, but she finds that all those suffering in the earth shall get peace in the land of the moon. The sufferers of the earth perhaps may go, released by death, to thy benignant sphere. Released by death, the phrase is apt to visualize the sense of being captured with pain from all directions, which can only be cut down by death. The moon is her heaven, where she imagines no kind of sorrow and a proper world to live in. Forget in thee their cup of sorrow here, and she hopes to reach there soon. The poem is a metaphysical one where the speaker willingly elevates her mind beyond the material world to forget her sorrows and wishes to merge into the realm of the moon. She bathes in the mild, placid rays of the moon to achieve freedom from her sufferings. That's it, sir.
Thank you, Krishna, for this excellent presentation. So, as we can hear from you, the quest for transcendence, the metaphysical element also you have pointed out. Metaphysics or metaphysical element refers to the transcendence of the body into the sphere of the soul. So if the dichotomy is there between the body, the material world, and the spiritual world, transcendence also refers to the elevation of the mind so that the bodily limitations can be crossed. Physical means the world of materials, and metaphysical means, meta means beyond that physical world. And this physical world outside the boundaries, okay, the physical world of outside the orb of human earthly life is the world of nature. So this transcendence is through the world of nature, and moon symbology is aptly used in this. Thank you, Krishna, for your excellent presentation. So now, Dipankar, you make your presentation, please.
Hello, sir. Hello. Am I audible, sir? Hello.
Yes, we can visualize you. So
Sir,
he
actually, I'm on the
walks.
roof. Okay. So.
Yeah, he walks in darkness like the night.
Yes, sir. Actually, sir, I haven't written that, sir. I am just trying to say. Actually, the
Yeah.
poem is about actually the poet here tries to say that here the moon is acting as like a mother. Okay, so to a depressed child, not only to a child. Here the child is all the people of the universe. So. So in our depressing time, uh, we try to find comfort in our mother's lap. Similarly, here the poet and all the depressed people of the world is also trying to find some kind of comfort under the moon. So here. The poet is talking about not only his problem but also the world's problem, and when they find themselves in trouble times, they love to go to the they love to find some comfort from the rays of the moon or from the bright side of the moon. So that's what I don't know what is happening, sir. I just read now. I just have read the poem. So that's what my opinion forcing me to say.
Okay, thank you, Dipankar, for your presentation.
Sir, can
Short
you
but
please? Okay, sir.
yes.
I don't actually, sir. I don't know about the topic, sir. I have just read the poem.
Yeah, on the basis of the poem, you made an excellent presentation. And
Sir.
if possible, show us the moon.
The moon. Where is the moon, sir? Okay,
Somewhere
sir.
in the
Here. So,
somewhere in the sky from the rooftop, you can show us the moon.
sir, can you see the moon, sir?
Can we see the moon? Yes, we can see the moon
Sir,
up
can
in
you
the
see the moon?
sky. Yes, it's a large moon, or just the
Uh,
light we are seeing.
Sir,
So many street light also there.
পাচ্ছি না তো,
Oh,
sir.
yes, we can see the moon. Yeah, up
Can you?
above the sky, we can see the moon. So
Yes,
twinkle,
sir.
twinkle, little star. So we cannot see the star, but we can see the moon. So you
Okay,
have
sir.
come very close in the sublunary world among the sad children of humanity. You are there, locating the moon on the rooftop. Thank you
Yes, sir.
for connecting us with the natural world in these
Okay, sir.
corona
Okay, sir.
in this
Thank you,
corona
sir.
times.
Okay, sir.
During this period, the period just before the Romantic period, we have the revival. We find the revival of the sonnet form. And interestingly, this revival of the sonnet form also that began around 1775, especially with the works of Thomas Gray. To this revival of the sonnet form, we also come very close to the person as well as nature together. As we know, says sonnet is written on the personal subject, and even in the sonnets of Shakespeare, we find that tropes are drawn heavily from nature. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Or my love is like a fever longing still. Even he says, that time of year thou mayest in me behold, that yellow leaves on none or few do hang upon the boughs which shake against the cold. Bare ruin choirs, he's talking about the wintry landscape, the autumnal landscape. So nature personification and the sonnet form, they go hand in glove together. So we have this revival of the sonnet with this return to nature, return to Petrarch and return to nature. But the difference, essential difference is that in the courtly love tradition of Petrarch, nature was used as a metaphor, not to draw us close to nature, but rather to use a kind of similitude, a similarity, in order to explain the human world. Nature becomes secondary. The human world becomes primary. If you have to describe the beauty of the lady or the boy or the man, you use natural tropes. And their nature becomes secondary, not primary. It is the beauty of the person that remains primary. Even in anti-Petrarchan poems, a sonnet by Shakespeare like, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, coral is far more red than her lips is red. If wires do grow, black wires grow on her head. So see how he has drawn symbology from nature in order to describe the female or just to uh, comment on the beauty of the female figure. Here we have another version of the treatment of nature. Romantic nature, romantic nature is not secondary. Romantic nature is primary. Even as a symbol, it affirms itself, its presence. And we can see how the self-conscious interiorization of nature can be seen in the poem of Charlotte Smith. Here we have this essential maternity, essential maternal love that is attributed to the world of nature. While the male poets look at this as a provider, nature as a provider, as a source, as natural resource, where the Prakriti is regarded by the Purush as the resource for exploitation, resource for energizing the self, as we find in words for Stinton Abbey. In the poem of Charlotte Smith, we find the affinity is very close. So she is turning herself into this central symbol of the moon. The poet herself is turning into that moon, giving solace to the sufferers of the world. And she herself, as a poet, vents or expresses the maternal love. So the poet and the moon, both symbols, gradually interrelate to each other. Thank you, Dipankar, for showing us or connecting us to the world of nature. So our next presentation will be by Yeah. Yes. Nafisha, you're there on the line? Yeah, Nafisha, you make your presentation, please.
So am I visible and audible?
Yes, make your presentation, please.
Oh. So today I will be talking about the reconciliation of the self with the society in the poem. From the very beginning, from the very opening of the poem, the moon is described as the queen of silver bow, which gives us the image of Diana, the Greek goddess of hunt. By fusing the image of the moon, which is the symbol of femininity, with the image of fierce Diana, Charlotte Smith goes against the masculine tradition of the society to represent woman only as a muse of the male poets and establishes an authoritative and powerful persona of her own. Further, the eye in the poem represents a female gaze that transforms the traditional symbol of the moon to a symbol of maternal love. When we delve deep into the poem, the aspect of economic inequality gets prominent. This can be found in the sympathetic manner in which the poet persona looks above to the moon, who is the queen and possesses immense wealth or silver. The poet here can be imagined as a poverty stricken girl who becomes spellbound in front of the rich moon due to her lower middle class insecurity. Yet she is delighted to see the trembling shadow of the moon, whose mild and placid light somewhat soothes her troubled breast. The third social aspect that we find in the poem is the people's belief in religion or particularly in Christianity. Here moon is used as a symbol of heaven, which is immortal, and the poem reflects on people's hope that the wretched or the sufferers of the earth will get relief after their death and will reach the moon, which is the place of their final rest. Also, the mention of the cup of sorrow of the sad children refers to the cup that contains the blood of Christ, symbolizing chastity. The sad children may also refer the darkest side of industrial revolution in the 18th century, which encouraged child labor. The final couplet is like an epithet which begins with a sigh, "Oh, although there is a desire to escape, but at the end the poet returns to the toiling scene." Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nafisha. The presentation was excellent, well written, well composed, drawing our attention to the interconnection between the individual self, the sensibility of the self, and the world of nature, world of society. Sonnet is a form, a very conscious form, that is often adopted by the poets, not only to express the self and the sensibility, but also to connect with the outside world. In case of Shakespeare's sonnet, we have the interconnection between the three characters, the Dark Lady, WH and WS. Even in the sonnets of Petrarch, we have this interconnection with or among few individuals. But in the romantic poems, we have the sonnet, the extension of sonnet to other people around, especially in the works of Charlotte Smith. Charlotte Smith's interconnection of this world, the natural landscape to subjective experience, is remarkable. She has the potentiality. Even the sonnet form has this potentiality for linking the natural landscape to the subjective experience of the writer. So in sonnet especially, we find this. Charlotte Smith's novels, even in her novels, we find her characters, especially in a state of melancholy or in a state of despair or depression. They find relief in structuring their emotions. Okay, structuring their emotion with the help of the natural world. The pastoral world offers this kind of release, kind of refuge to the characters in trauma, in despair. So this structuring of emotion in sonnet form is, however, difficult because of its brevity of form. So there is certain economy of form. You can only write 14 lines, and that 14 lines have to be 10 syllabic. Every line should be of 10 syllables. So it is very difficult to contain that emotional strength, intensity in the sonnet form. And yet we find in elegiac sonnet, especially this sonnet, sonnet number 4, we find this kind of condensation where the character has been able to, the speaker has been able to put the self and the sensibility, the individual, with reference to the nature and connect that to the other, the outside world. Everything becomes a part of the whole. Okay, that is what romanticism is all about. While surgically the anatomy of society can be seen in the works of the neoclassical writers, poets, in romantic sonnets we have a kind of interconnectedness between the self and society, between the society and the world of nature and the individual. So it is a kind of magical circle and every part is included. So it is a holistic way of looking at nature that we find in the sonnets of Charlotte Smith. Thank you, Nafisha, for your excellent presentation connecting the self individual with society and the evolution of the self in the poem. So
Thank you, sir.
next presentation will be by Poshali. Poshali, make your presentation, please. Poshali, you are on the line? Yes, make your
Yes, sir.
presentation, please. So you are audible. Make yourself
Yes.
visible if possible.
Sir,
Okay, continue.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable, otherwise continue. Yeah, we can hear
Yeah.
you.
Charlotte Smith wrote elegiac sonnets in 1783 while she was in a prison with her husband and children. But during her publications and for her poems, William Wordsworth identified her as an important influence on the Romantic movement. She published her several poems, long poems, sonnets, and novels, which she wrote during her life, during her entire life. We are here talking about the poem sonnet number 4 by Charlotte Smith, To the Moon. Here, in this poem, she uh, follows the way of Shakespeare. She uses the form of Shakespearean sonnet. She wrote this poem 14 lines, and which is divided in 3 quadrants and a couplet. In this poem, we find the nature described by the poem, described by the poet. The moon here is the subject, the subject of the poem, as well as it describes the nature. Actually, a place to rest or to find relief from this toiling art. The mood of the speaker fluctuates from optimistic to sometimes pessimistic way. Sometimes she is expressing her emotions through sorrow or doom or in a sad way. On the other side, she sometimes talks about the positive sides of the art. In this poem, mostly the tone of the poem is mostly melancholy. Nature is presented through the moon. First quatrain of this poem is expressed as external beauty of the moon, and second quatrain is about the healing of nature. And towards the end of the poem, she describes Hello, sir.
Yeah, there is some networking issue.
Yes,
Okay, we
maybe.
can hear you. Yeah. So this is your conclusion, or you want to say something more?
Uh, the whole poem, mood is dim, but towards the end of the poem, we find a glimpse of happier tone, like when the poet is saying the depressed people of this art can visit the moon, where where we can uh, where we can find peace or relief from this toiling earth. And about structure of this poem, the rhyme scheme of this poem is A B A B C D C D E F E F, and the couplet is G G. Sir,
Okay, over.
yes.
Okay, thank you, Poshali, for analysis of the poem. So you have referred to the formal organization of the sonnet form, how Charlotte Smith has used the sonnet form to express a very complex or a simple theme. You have also talked about the fluctuation of the poet from optimism to pessimism. That is again a realization of the agonized self, a romantic predicament. The choice is always there. The yearning for something afar from the sphere of the sorrow, the figure and fret of life that is there in this longing is optimistic, and the realization is pessimistic, as you have said.
Yes,
So
sir.
sonnet offers this opportunity of the writer to dramatize the self, even the contradictory self together. So it is almost like soliloquy, speaking to oneself. So sonnet is almost like soliloquy. You are speaking to your own self, trying to resolve some problems that are there. In the sonnets of Shakespeare, we have this soliloquizing speaker who often takes into account the different consciousness, the states of different consciousness into account, and then deliberately tries to dramatize and develop a kind of conflict. In most of the sonnets of Shakespeare, you find this internal conflict that is occurring in the mind of the poet. But in Charlotte Smith, this conflict is resolved. Okay, the synthesis there, of course. The longing for the escape into the world of the moon is there, as well as the realization of the very pain is there. But in spite of this yearning desire, she remains firmly rooted in the world of earthly experience. Romanticism talks about the strength and stillness of public liberty, trying to break the shackles of this poor, very soul. The attempt to release the self from the constraints of society. The societal pressure is, of course, there. And Charlotte Smith does not leave the society out and includes the society in the self. So we have this use of personal sonnet form to comment on the public. This is a hallmark of the romantic sonnetteers. Say, for example, Wordsworth is writing London 1802, where he's commenting directly on the social situation. Milton, thou shouldest be living at this hour. England hath need of thee. So England has become a friend. So he's making a comment on the contemporary politics in the sonnet form. Sonnet is used for the public poetic statement during this period. Even Leigh Hunt on a lock of Milton's hair is talking about this. John Keats, however, uses this parable story, the fable story of the grasshopper and the cricket, a sonnet named on the grasshopper and the cricket. John Keats is trying to reveal the condition of a poet, unlocking the narrow room. He is using the sonnet to explore two landscapes, the two poetic worlds, one represented by the grasshopper, the other represented by the cricket, using a kind of fresh rhyme scheme in the sonnet form. And in Shelley, we also have sonnets, say England in 1819, where we have again a public issue. He writes, an old, mad, vine, despised, and dying king, princes, the dregs of the dull race who flow. So a revolutionary poem, a sonnet, is written for a revolutionary purpose. So romantic sonnet, we can say, is different from the Elizabethan sonnet. Elizabethan sonnet was intimately personal. In a very strict Italian form, the sonnets were composed. Minor improvisations were there. One or two sonnets of Shakespeare also illustrate some kind of experiment in the form, but nevertheless, they talk about the person. Here we have the bridging of the person, the self with the society, and self with the nature. That is a remarkable feature of this poem. So our next presentation will be by Prashanjit. Prashanjit Vishwas, make your
Yes,
presentation,
sir.
please.
So am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Make your presentation, please. You want to make yourself visible?
Okay, sir. So am I visible now?
Yes, yes. Make your presentation, please.
Structure is it is a literary device of representing works towards the readers. This includes technical things like the lines, length, format of the stanza, consistency, and so on. Charlotte Smith's poem To the Moon is a sonnet that is written following the Shakespearean tradition of sonnet. It includes 14 lines, which are divided into 3 quatrains and a concluding couplet, as well as rhyme scheme, that is ABAB, CDCD, EFEF, and GG. Thereafter, the poem is written in iambic pentameter, that is also visible in Shakespearean sonnet. In the beginning stanza of the poem, the beauty of the nature as well as the beauty of the moon is portrayed. Mm. This beauty is extended in the description of the following stanza by the author, who at the same time also enjoying it. But a peripeteia arises while reading the final quatrains that reveals a short conflict between the inner view and the outer view of the author. And finally, through the concluding couplet, the intention, that is the intention of rejecting the ephemeral world and desire of taking shelter beneath the immortal beauty of the moon is raised by the poet. Thus, the structure is beautifully developed by the author, who is also has completely expressed the agony of the poet. Uh, that is one of the most important features of a sonnet. So that's it.
Thank you, Prashanjit. The excellent analysis
Thank you.
of the sonnet, the structure of the sonnet. So structure means a form. I said structure and form both are interrelated. You cannot think of one without the other. And structure and content are also interrelated. If you focus on the structure only, you won't be able to understand the content. If you focus only on the content, you cannot understand the structure. Form is content, content is form. So the poem, as you have mentioned, has a well-made structure. Even the logical structure of the poem is, you say, quite carefully structured with a progression, sense of progression, and you also refer to peripeteia at the end of the poem. Peripeteia is a reversal of fortune. So I find this very interesting. Although I have not thought about this earlier, I find your viewpoint very interesting. So the poem has a structure. So it is a 4-part structure, 3 quatrains and 1 couplet. Usually in Shakespearean sonnets, we have 2 types of logical structure, or in Elizabethan sonnets, having this 4-part structure, we have 2 forms. Number 1, either it is a dialectical structure, where a thesis is placed and 2 antithetical statements are placed in the 2 subsequent quatrains, and then after that there is a general synthesis in the couplet. This one dialectical structure that we often find in the sonnets of the Elizabethan period. The second is again based on statement, explanation, and then some kind of commentary on that. So it is a different type of structure, although logical. So first a statement is made. In the second quatrain, the statement is given explanation with more examples. In the third quatrain, again, that statement is made stronger with more examples. And in the final couplet, there is a general observation. So in Charlotte Smith's poem, however, we find that two structures are correlated, interrelated. So I find this a complex structure, and this complex structure is achieved with the help of a very simple kind of rhyme scheme. A B A B C D C D E F E F. Yeah, the rhyme scheme, and finally we have G G A B A B C D. Yeah, repeat.
and GG.
So A B A B C C C C. Say light, breast, night, rest. Okay, A B A B C D C D E F E F G G. In the previous sonnet, yeah, this is a sonnet rhyme scheme. Do you agree with me? This is the rhyme scheme of the sonnet. So light must rhyme with night, breast with rest, go with woe, spear with here, serene and seen, beam with stream, stray, way. So A B C D C D E F E F G G. Okay, so you know how to search for the rhyme scheme. It depends on not on the alphabets, but on the sound. So it is a 14 line composed in iambic pentameter, and rhyme scheme is always regular iambic pentameter lines. So there is no irregularity in the rhyme scheme. In certain lines, we have the trochaic variations. Symbols are there in the poem. So the logical structural statement is made, and then that statement is again developed in the next quatrain. Again, that is logically developed with a kind of, as you said, peripeteia, a kind of discovery, recognition. So it's not a reversal of fortune. Anagnosis or peripeteia? Which one will you say? Prashanjit? Is it a reversal of fortune?
No, sir.
Then anagnosis is
there is a
discovery.
conflict between her inner view and outer view.
Okay, so this conflict or contradiction you find in the poem.
Sir, I think it is a contradiction.
Okay, contradiction. That contradiction cannot be talked about as peripeteia. Peripeteia talks about the reversal of fortune. You were hoping for something, and the things have turned just the opposite of it. What you intended, but the thing has turned just the opposite of it. So that is called peripeteia. Anagnosis, on the other hand, is the discovery, realization. So there is a realization in this poem, logical development of that in this poem. Thank you, Prashanjit. So we move on to our next presentation. Shagufta, make your presentation, please. So now we move on to line-wise analysis of the poem. Yes, Shagufta.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Yes, make your presentation.
So may I start?
Yes.
The moon. In this sonnet, poet describes the beauty of the moon. In the first line, poet says the Queen of Silver Bow. Here, the Queen of Silver Bow, symbolizing the Greek goddess of the moon. The poet in this sonnet uses the Greek mythology and the imagery to seeing the nature by comparing the moon to the Artemis, Greek goddess of the moon. In this poem, we can see the moon in a mystical and a supernatural way, where the moon is described as both as an object and a place of the rest and relief from the earth, where the sufferers of the earth could get the relief. Here also poet uses the moon as the symbol of the heaven which brights in the dark. The poet looks whole the earth as a dark place which full of the evils and the sins. But the moon would be the great heaven even when the world is dark, it remains the shining bright. Throughout the whole poem, the mood is somewhat dim, but towards the end, there is an escalation to the happier ending. He starts to propose the idea that the moon is where he will have his final rest, but ends with a sound. The line of the poem: "Oh, that I soon may reach thy word son, poor weird pilgrim in this toiling scene." Here, the poet found the moon is an attractive destination because of its peacefulness and its never ending light in the darkness. It is the place where, unlike Earth, there would be no evil and no conflict. To conclude the poem, the poet found the moon is far better than the earth. By comparing the earth by moon, the poet found the earth is a restless place, full of the darkness, while he found the moon a peaceful place where the people tortured by the earth could get relief and rest there. And also appreciating the moon endless brightness, and poet found his own heaven in the moon. That's all, sir.
Thank you, Shagufta, for your presentation. So the opening line of the poem, you refer to that and then related the symbology of the moon with the entire poem. So just we move on. Thank you, Shagufta. Our next presentation will be by Shampriti Ghosh. Shampriti, make your presentation, please.
Yes, sir. To the Moon by Charlotte Turner Smith is an elegiac sonnet written in 1784 and published in 1787, composed of iambic pentameter with ABAB CDCD EFEF GG rhyme scheme. In this poem, the poet is mainly focusing on the earthly sorrows and human sufferings, which makes us realize the social reality. The poem is addressed to the moon, which is being personified as Diana, the Greek goddess of wild animals or the huntress. The moon has been used in history as an object that gives unusual, supernatural, or mythical powers. These powers consisted of both good and bad depending on the past literatures. Here in this poem, the moon is interpreted as the object that shows the power to open up other realms of the world. The shadow figure is the reflection of the moon in the water, which represents the doorway to the world that Smith is trying to represent. The pale beam of the shadow of the moon is something which pacifies the poet's troubled heart. In this poem, the moon is described in depth as both an object and a place of relief from the earthly sorrows. The poet finds it as an attractive destination because of its peacefulness and its never-ending light even in the darkness. It is a place where, unlike Earth, there would be no evil and no conflict. So that's it, sir.
Thank you, Shampriti, for your analysis. So just we move on to our next presentation. Shana Kaur, make your presentation, please.
Sir, am I visible?
Yes, you are visible and audible both. Make your presentation, please.
For today's presentation, we are discussing a particular word and its significance in the poem To the Moon by Charlotte Smith. So, the poet in the first stanza likens the moon with the Greek goddess Diana holding a bow in the night sky. The poet goes on to say that the pale and mellow light of the moon is a delight and comfort and a source of comfort to the poet. The moon is casting a reflection in a nearby stream where the image is moving with the movement of the water. Lastly, the poet says that the clouds that pass by the moon in the sky brighten up or block the moonlight when they are too consistent. The word shadow is first seen in the third line of the first stanza, and uh, the use of the word shadow is a device of contrast which shows both light and darkness. The presence of shadow is seen as the obstruction of light by an object in the path of light. But here, the moon's reflection is attributed as the shadow of the moon. As the moon is the major light source in the night sky, the shadow of the moon should be literally impossible. However, the poet takes her poetic license to symbolize the transient image of the moon in the water of a stream, which marks which goes along the line with the central theme where the sublunar world, which is ever changing and transitory, is contrasted with the universal and lunar world, which is apparently unchanging. The shadow is also an ominous or uh, uh, sad word, which marks the mood of the poem as sad and melancholic. We can remember in Macbeth by William Shakespeare, where the famous line, "Life's but a walking shadow," which shows that the human life is limited. So, as long as the spotlight is on the person living the life, once the light goes out, the life is over, and death creeps in like the darkness of the night. So, here perhaps Charlotte Smith is drawing a parallel to this theme, symbolizing that the moon, whose light is universal and ever changing, will always remain constant in the lunar space. But the light or images witnessed by the sublunar beings will be temporary, and as not only the people but all the living beings of the landscape will also change with time. So while the solitary, immortal, majestic moon will forever shine on with her dim and soothing light, uh, uh, but her trembling and temporary reflection or shadow will forever keep changing in the stream of infinite time. Thank you, sir. That's all.
Thank you, Shanoy. Thank you, Shanoy, for your excellent analysis. So we move on. Shalini, you are on the line. Shalini, please make your presentation.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, audible, visible also. Make your presentation, please.
Yes, sir. Charlotte Smith was an English novelist and poet highly praised by the novelist Sir Walter Scott. William Wordsworth identified her as an important influence on the Romantic movement. In the first line of the poem, To the Moon, the poet is comparing the moon to the Diana, the Greek goddess of the moon. Here, the poet addresses herself as alone and depressed who finds relief after watching the shadow of the moon in the river. The moving cloud also draws the attention of the poet as crossing the path of the moon. Here the poet refers the cloud as floating clouds which moves in the sky. And the moon is compared to heaven in the sense the rich use its beauty as refuge and for those sufferers of the earth who will take rest. The poet also comments that uh, the poet also comments that the sufferers will be released through death to the gracious sphere, and the sad children who is frustrated will leave their pain in this world. At the end of the poem, she calls Earth a toiling scene, speaking of all the evils on the earth. She also reminds herself that very soon she too will be reached in the world of the moon, where she finds her peace of heaven. Throughout the poem, the mood is somewhat fading, but towards the end, there is an escalation of happier ending. That's all, sir.
Okay, thank you, Shalini. You can hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Shalini, for your excellent presentation. So as we are
Thank
running
you,
out
sir.
of time, okay, we move on to the next one. Srideshna Das, make your presentation, please.
Hello, sir.
Yes, you're audible.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, you can make yourself visible.
Actually, sir, some internet issues are happening there. So
Okay.
please let me know if I am both audible
No
and
issue.
visible or
Continue.
not.
Make your presentation, please. Continue. We can hear you. Yes, continue, please.
Thank you, sir. The Queen is in sonnet of the poem directly addressed it. Therefore, here the summary and description. All the pessimistic meet the moon as beauty. The heaven in the poem by the poetry light of the luminous nature of created, and the feminine energy and Artemis, and given epithets, it induces with an air the violent contemporaries like moon as solely female needs stability and consistency. She imagines as a symbol of peace, which not in heaven, comfort through soothing my.
Shrideshna, because of some networking issues, we cannot hear you. Okay. Shrideshna, because of the networking issue, we cannot hear you properly. Yeah, some disturbance is there. So just wait and be online because it's already 1 hour 45 minutes. So it must be some networking issues. Problems will be there regarding data. So shall we continue it next day? Tomorrow we can continue?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, that will be better for you all.
Yes, sir.
So we will continue with Shrideshna. You will get this opportunity next day. We will start with that. Okay. We will have a short discussion and then wind up the poem and begin a new one. Next one. Okay. Next day. Thank you very much. I thank everyone for
Thank you, sir.
participating. If
Thank
any
you, sir.
questions, if any questions you have, you can ask. Do you have any question? Yeah, if any question you have, you can ask me now. So we have learned a lot from you all about the poem. And through this discussion, we have been able to analyze different aspects of the poem. Any other question from your side? So can we take leave? Okay. No questions? So stay safe, look after your family members, be in a happy mood. Thank you very much. Bye. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Good night, sir.
Good night, sir.
Good night,
Meet
sir.
you.
Sir, you too, safe.
Good night, sir.
So meet you
Good
tomorrow
night, sir.
7:30. Tomorrow 7:30 we will meet again.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So I will try to keep that within
Okay.
1 hour next day
Okay,
onwards.
sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.